The year is 1968. Britain is a nation on edge, its empire dismantled, its economy in decline, and its streets erupting with protests and unrest. The spectre of a nation losing its grip on global dominance haunts every corner of Westminster. It is against this backdrop that whispers of a plot begin to circulate, an extraordinary conspiracy suggesting that Lord Louis Mountbatten, the last Viceroy of India and the highly decorated naval officer, might be recruited to lead a coup against Britain's own elected government. This was no ordinary rumor. This was a serious proposition that nearly pushed the United Kingdom, the proud mother of parliamentary democracy, into the dangerous territory of authoritarian rule. By the late 1960s, Britain was undergoing a political and social earthquake. Prime Minister Harold Wilson's Labour government faced deep hostility from sections of the military, intelligence services, and the aristocracy. Strikes and inflation were crippling the economy. Anti-Vietnam War protests were spilling into London streets. For the old establishment, Wilson, a working-class intellectual with no ties to the aristocracy, was an outsider. Rumors, some fueled by Cold War paranoia, painted him as a man compromised by Soviet influence. This fear, whether rooted in fact or fabrication, opened the door for discussions that, shockingly, turned toward the unthinkable. Replacing an elected government with a national unity administration led by none other than Lord Mountbatten. Mountbatten was not just any figure, he was royalty, uncle to Prince Philip, cousin to the Queen, and beloved by the upper echelons of the establishment. More importantly, he was a war hero, remembered as Supreme Allied Commander in Southeast Asia, and later as the man who oversaw the turbulent handover of India in 1947. Charismatic, aristocratic, and seen as a man of destiny, Mountbatten embodied the kind of authority the conspirators craved. If democracy appeared to be failing, who better to step in than a man with a military pedigree and royal blood? But this idea was no idle fantasy. According to accounts that emerged later, including interviews and memoirs, influential businessmen, intelligence operatives, and media moguls discussed real plans. Among them was Cecil King, the powerful head of the International Publishing Corporation, who saw Wilson as a dangerous liability. King allegedly proposed that Wilson be removed and replaced by a caretaker government led by Mountbatten. The most notorious moment in this shadowy saga came during a meeting at Mountbatten's home. King, accompanied by journalist Hugh Cudlip, reportedly laid out the proposal directly to Mountbatten himself. Britain needed saving, and he was the man to do it. For a moment, it seemed like history could take a dark and extraordinary turn. The idea of tanks on London streets, of Parliament sidelined, and of a royal-backed figurehead ruling Britain was closer than most Britons would ever imagine. Accounts differ on Mountbatten's reaction. Some say he was intrigued, even flattered, by the suggestion. Others argue he was cautious, knowing full well that such a move could destabilize the monarchy and destroy the very foundations of British democracy. Ultimately, it was his advisor, Sir Solly Zuckerman, who shut down the conversation, warning Mountbatten that entertaining such an idea would be catastrophic. The coup never materialized, but the fact that it was even discussed reveals the cracks in Britain's democratic armor during that turbulent era. To understand the context of this plot, one must look at the global stage. The late 1960s were dominated by Cold War anxieties. Coups had toppled governments in Greece, Brazil, and other nations. Britain, though proud of its democratic traditions, was not immune to the same fears of communist infiltration that had spurred military takeovers elsewhere. Wilson's government, with its emphasis on social reforms and its uneasy relationship with the intelligence services, was always viewed with suspicion by the establishment. Within MI5 and the military, some believed Wilson was either under Moscow's thumb or dangerously sympathetic to leftist causes. Though no hard evidence has ever confirmed this, the mere perception of disloyalty was enough to feed coup discussions. Mountbatten's name was therefore not an accident. It was a calculated choice meant to blend military strength with royal legitimacy. The so-called Mountbatten coup never came to pass for several reasons. First, Mountbatten himself, despite his ego and aristocratic pride, was cautious enough to avoid outright treason. Second, Britain's democratic institutions, though battered, still held strong. Unlike nations where coups succeeded, Britain had an entrenched parliamentary tradition and a loyal, disciplined military that remained largely committed to civilian rule. And third, perhaps most importantly, the monarchy itself would not risk its survival on such a gamble. The Queen, ever careful to remain politically neutral, would not support a move that could destroy the crown's legitimacy forever. Imagine, for a moment, if Mountbatten had agreed. If the tanks had rolled, if Parliament had been suspended, if Britain had joined the long list of countries where coups replaced ballots. The course of history would have been irrevocably altered, not just for Britain, but for the entire Western alliance during the Cold War. In the end, democracy survived. But the shadows of 1968 remind us of a simple truth. Democracy is only as strong as the people who defend it. For in times of crisis, when fear and paranoia take hold, even the oldest democracies can find themselves standing on the edge of authoritarianism. And sometimes all it takes to prevent the fall is one voice of reason, like Zuckerman's, reminding us of the cost of betrayal.